Hey nerds. So, I just wanted to talk about one little section of this book I recently read by the theologian Bart Ehrman, who this is the his book called How Jesus Became God and How Early Christians did or wait, no, specifically that Jesus did not claim to be divine in the Bible, and arguments about whether he actually was divine or not, and how this this thought of seeing him as divine evolved throughout the history of Christianity, that kind of thing, which I think is really interesting. And this is a Christian theologian, keep in mind. So I thought this was interesting, him criticizing Christian apologists who think that miracles can be proven. So, which I appreciate him as a theologian debunking that bullshit, because he's showing that you can be a Christian and still not believe in dumb shit like miracles. So let's go into the quote here. He calls this section The Resurrection and the Historian. The reason historians cannot prove or disprove whether God has performed a miracle in the past, such as raising Jesus from the dead and making Jesus a zombie, is not that historians are required to be secular humanists with an anti supernaturalist bias. Yeah, obviously, it's not like you're inherently biased if you don't believe in miracles. That's backwards. You're inherently biased if you do believe in miracles. But I mean, that doesn't mean that, like, this is a theologian talking about this. That's just a dumb approach to proving miracles. Like, I'm trying to think up a better way of trying to prove miracles, but that's kind of a dumb thing to do, really. Anyway, so such as raising Jesus from the dead is not that historians are required to be secular humanists with an anti-supernaturalist bias. I want to stress this point because conservative Christian apologists, in order to score debating points, often claim that this is the case. It's obviously not. It depends on the fucking person, right? We're all individuals with different ways of thinking and ideologies and versions of our religions or lack thereof. So, in their view, if historians did not have anti supernaturalist biases or assumptions, they would be able to affirm the historical quote unquote evidence that Jesus was raised from the dead. Yes, Jesus was literally raised from the dead. They're biblical literalists that way. I should point out that these Christian apologists almost never consider the quote unquote evidence for other miracles other than Jesus being raised from the dead from the past that are comparable or even better evidence to support them, arguably. For example, dozens of Roman senators apparently claim that King Romulus was snatched up into the heaven from their midst. So there are apparently I'm guessing more eyewitnesses behind that than those who witnessed Jesus being raised from the dead. In fact, no one actually saw him being raised from the dead. They saw, if I remember correctly, according to biblical accounts anyway, which you have to take those with at least a grain of salt, there were people who discovered his empty tomb and then discovered him walking after he was dead. And the first few were like his female disciples, I think. But anyway, so dozens of Roman senators claim that King Romulus was snatched up into heaven from their midst, and many thousands of committed Roman Catholics can attest that the Blessed Virgin Mary has appeared to them alive, a claim that fundamentalists and conservative evangelical Christians roundly discount, even though the quote unquote evidence for it is very extensive. If you call that evidence, like a whole bunch of people apparently witnessing the Virgin Mary appearing to them, well, I mean, that is better evidence than like literally no eyewitness accounts of being Jesus being raised from the dead, but evidence of seeing his empty tomb and evidence of apparently seeing him after he had died, which allows people to assume that he'd been raised from the dead, but no one actually witnessed him coming out of the grave through the divine power of God. So anyway, so it's always the case then the stories of Jesus' resurrection were indeed being expanded, embellished, modified, and possibly even invented in the long process of their being told and retold over the years. So even theologians, he's far from only theologian who's like this. Theologians, plenty, I would say that probably most biblical theologians actually disagree that Jesus was literally raised from the dead. It's Christian conservative apologists like he's talking about who believe that kind of dumb shit that he literally was raised from the dead as a miracle by the mighty divine power of God. So anyway, but what lies at the foundation of these stories? What, if anything, can we say historically about the resurrection event? At this point, Oh wait, I went back a page instead of forward. That's why I confused myself and started reading the wrong part. Okay, it's always easy to scream anti-supernatural bias when someone does not think that the miracles of one's own tradition can be historically established. It's much harder to admit that miracles of other traditions are just as readily demonstrated. Yeah, of course. Like people in their own religions, like Christians, they think, oh, there are evidence for these Christian miracles, but these miracles in the Quran or or the Jewish canonical texts, like these didn't happen, only these miracles in the New Testament, etc., or only these miracles in the Bible, none of the miracles in Hinduism or any other religion like that, or any of the innumerable religions throughout the thousands of years of human history during which we've had religions. And but anyway, so the let's go back to the quote here. So but the view I map out here is that none of these divine miracles or any others can be established historically. Conservative evangelical Christian apologists are right to say that this is because of the presuppositions of the investigators, but it's also their own presuppositions as well, right? Everyone has presuppositions and biases, but if you're biased towards not finding evidence for miracles, there obviously are also conservative Christian apologists who are biased towards looking for and believing in miracles, right? Okay. Right to say that this is because of the presuppositions of the investigators, but not for the reason they think or say. The first thing to stress is that everyone has presuppositions, and it is impossible to live life, think deep thoughts, have religious experiences, or engage in historical inquiry without having presuppositions. Obviously true, right? The life of the mind cannot proceed without presuppositions. The question, though, is always this: what are the appropriate presuppositions for the task at hand? Makes sense? The presuppositions that the Roman Catholic believer brings to his experience of the Mass will be different from the presuppositions that the scientist brings to exploration of the Big Bang, not only in the spirit, right? So obviously scientists have biases when they're investigating the Big Bang, in the same way that Roman Catholics have biases when they're practicing Mass, right? Like science and religion have their own rituals, and scientists, just like religious people, have their own biases. Everyone has their own biases about everything. So the scientist brings to her exploration of the Big Bang, but only in the spirit, and others insisted that Jesus's raised body was so closely connected to this corpse that it bore all the marks of its mortality still upon it. So this is like more dumb evidence of Jesus's resurrection. But the point is that everyone has presuppositions, and basically the main point of this passage is Bart Ehrman. I thought it was interesting because it's Bart Ehrman, a theologian who a lot of Christians don't seem to think have these like liberal Christian opinions. But anyway, a theologian is just basically trashing the arguments of conservative Christian apologists and their supposed belief in miracles based on evidence that isn't really actually good evidence at all. And his point is not even that you shouldn't believe in miracles. His point is that these theologians are biased because they believe their chosen Christian miracles, but not other religions' miracles, even not other miracles in the same religion sometimes. So everyone is biased, and if you're calling someone saying that someone has an anti-supernaturalist bias, that's probably also, that may be the case, but it's also because you are biased towards looking for the supernatural. So even if you accept the premise that you can find miracles, then you're biased towards looking for the right miracles. So if you accept the premise that miracles can occur, and you're biased towards believing those but not others, then it's obviously entirely possible that the miracles that you think are real, all of the miracles that you think are correct and true, obviously are actually wrong, and all the ones you think are wrong are actually right. So that's how biases can get you all backwards in your assumptions of anything, regardless of who you are. So like I said, everyone has biases, as Bart Ehrman points out, and people who believe in miracles are biased, and believing in miracles is, as I say, believing in miracles is just fucking dumb anyway.